Welcome to Geopolitical Horizons, the podcast from thegeopolity.com. Hezbollah has launched hundreds of rockets and dozens of drones towards numerous Israeli military targets in northern Israel on the 25th of August. Much of the world was expecting a Hezbollah strike since Israel's assassination of Faud Shukr, a Hezbollah commander in Beirut on July the 30th. With the US ceasefire stalling and Israel's assassination strategy expanding, which included the killing of Hamas's chairman Ismail Hanaya in Tehran on July 31st. It seems events are spiraling out of control and a region-wide war is inching closer. Here to dissect this all for us is Geopolity founder Adnan Khan. It's been a while, Adnan.
It has, Yusuf. It's good to be here again.
Good to have you back. So Adnan, we will soon be coming up to the 1-year anniversary of October 7th. And whilst most of Israel's attacks have been on Gaza, would the attacks we see in Lebanon, Syria and in Yemen mean this is now a regional war? Would it be classed as a regional war now?
So, Yusuf, Israel would like it to be so. Israel is the one that would like a regional war. Israel is the one that's actually been pushing and gunning for a regional war. But nobody else actually wants a regional war. Neither does America, neither does Iran, neither does the other countries. And the reason why this is as far as Israel's concerned, Gaza and the West Bank are not some standalone territories. As far as they're concerned, these two territories get significant support from abroad. They get support from Iran. So their view is the supply line to these two territories, they run into the border region. So as far as Israel's concerned, this is not just a battle within historic Palestine. It goes beyond into the region. And in order to defend itself, Israel is doing this. That's the Israeli narrative. Also, the more we talk about a regional war, then the less we're talking about what Israel is doing in Gaza. Israel is still carrying out a genocide in Gaza. It's still massacring in Gaza. I think Gaza, the last I read, 80-90% of the buildings no longer exist. They've been bombed back to the Stone Age. And then I think we also got to keep in mind, Yusuf, that it's Israel that attacked the Iranian embassy on the 1st of April. Because of this act, and remember, in international law, in the international community, you don't attack other people's embassies, even in times of war. You don't attack consulates. These are like sacrosanct. Israel launched an attack on the Iranian embassy in Syria, and that led to the Iranian response. So what Israel can't do is now argue we're defending ourselves when they were the original, they originally launched the strike. And not just in Syria. We see Israel launched an attack on the Hudaybiyah port in Yemen on the 20th of July. On the 31st of July, they carried out assassinations, as you mentioned, in Lebanon and also Tehran as well. So as you can see, Israel's keen to expand the war. And the reason why Israel's keen to expand it, it has its own strategic interest for this. But Israel knows that America will be forced to come and defend it. America constantly says it believes in Israel's right to defend itself, so it has to come and actually defend it. So from an Israeli perspective, they've got perfect opportunity here. They can deal with some of the regional issues they've always felt threatened with. And because they're already under siege, America will be forced to come and actually defend it. So really, this is what's going on. And Israel keeps saying this is a long-term war. They're saying something that's going to be wrapped up very, very quickly. You mentioned we're coming up to a year. They're at war with Hamas, which has no level of capability remotely close to Israel. Really, what Israel is doing here is long-term agenda has always been to deal with these regional threats. Its long-term agenda has always been to take the territories in historic Palestine. And that's why we're seeing this very heavy-handed, disproportionate response where they're carrying out a genocide in historic Palestine, and they're carrying out strikes in the broader region.
Many people would argue that what we're seeing now, Israel's tactics, Israel's expansion of the war, is actually more due to the fact that you have far-right ministers within the government. Are we saying that this is not just about the far-right individuals within the government, but it's actually Israel's broader objective across the board, i.e. it transcends the different parties that exist?
So this has been a propaganda narrative some Israelis have pushed for a while. It's something the Israeli regime resorts to when it's under pressure. So whenever a minister makes a genocidal statement, when they call for a Holocaust against the Palestinians, what you'll find is they say, oh, it's just the right wing in the government. You know, we're not all like this. And that's interesting because since Netanyahu's really been in government, we've been seeing this wipe Iran off the map. We've been seeing the expansion of settlements. This actually has been the long-term Israeli policy. You look at the Zionist founders, they've always said that, there's already people who reside in historic Palestine, and their strategy was they were going to carry out a genocide. They were going to force them off their land, and they've been doing it. The only difference you could say there has been is how to achieve the occupation and settlement and colonization of Palestine. There was a slight difference between the left and the right in Israel. The right have always argued that we're going to expel the indigenous people, much like the European settlers did in America or the European settlers did in Australia and New Zealand. That's consistently been the right-wing view in Israel. The left-wing view was, we are going to take over most of the land in historic Palestine, but they were okay to negotiate where some of these final territories will be and where a Palestinian state will be. But really what you find now is whether left or right, there's no negotiation now where Palestine will be. In fact, the Israeli parliament passed a law in early August where they said that they don't believe in a Palestinian state and basically there shouldn't be a Palestinian state altogether, even though this has been... So funny, they accuse Palestinians of not wanting peace when they've actually passed a piece of legislation where they say they don't believe in a Palestinian state. So what that means is the whole of Palestine, Israel wants to physically occupy. So it's not just about the right. Really what's happened is the right wing were born and evolved in this particular climate and reality. So this is Israeli policy, whether you're on the left and right now. There's really no distinction between left and right.
President Biden, he launched a ceasefire proposal on the 31st of May, which was meant to reduce the chances of a regional war breaking out and lead to some sort of long-term solution. I would say that it would seem that this deal is pretty much dead now.
Yeah, obviously with the events going on with what's happened with Iran and the assassinations, you would expect the ceasefire proposal is actually dead. But the ceasefire proposal never really took off, fundamentally due to Israel not wanting a ceasefire. If there's a ceasefire, it means Israel can't do what it's actually doing. And each time a ceasefire has been proposed, each time a country has put one on the table, what you find is Israel either stalls, it drags its feet, it tries to put additional conditions, which means the proposal stalls, or launches attacks. Now, this particular ceasefire proposal, it was actually proposed by Joe Biden, the US president himself, and it had three parts to it, is that there should be a 6-week ceasefire in which the IDF would withdraw from populated areas of Gaza. The second was that there would be a surge in humanitarian aid. At the moment, Yusuf, the aid isn't getting in. There's a man-made famine at the moment in Gaza because the aid that gets to Gaza, the Israelis don't actually let it in. And the third would be that there would be some sort of exchange of hostages. Now, eventually, when these three things are in place, there could be talk for a permanent cessation of hostilities and some sort of major restructuring plan for Gaza. Now, initially when this was launched, the way the Americans launched it is they said it's the Israeli proposal, so Hamas needs to accept it. And what you found is the military in Israel, they were all for it. Blinken went out to even meet Netanyahu as soon as it was launched. And in press conferences, Netanyahu accepted it, but in subsequent days, he started talking against this particular plan. Now, in Netanyahu's coalition government, you've got some proper right-wingers. And they were telling him that we would leave the coalition if you agree to this proposal. And if they leave the coalition, the government falls and there has to be new elections. And it's very unlikely Netanyahu would be elected. If there is elections and if the coalition breaks apart, it's very likely Netanyahu investigation will start against him regarding how even October 7th happened. So what you find, Yusuf, is this proposal stalling because Netanyahu keeps adding more and more conditions. So he explicitly said that the deal should include a permanent ceasefire and that he would continue to target Hamas until the organization was destroyed, even if there's a ceasefire. So this position goes completely against the essence of the proposal. The whole idea of a ceasefire is you stop fighting. And he's saying, I'll agree to the ceasefire, but I still want to be able to target Hamas. And there shouldn't be a permanent ceasefire. He keeps saying that Israel wants control of the Gaza-Egypt border, the Philadelphia corridor. And Israel is actually saying that it wants to decide who it actually frees in the prison exchange. So whilst Hamas is being told you have to free everyone, Netanyahu's arguing Israel will decide who it frees and who it actually doesn't. Netanyahu also says that Israel needs to control the movement in Gaza, north-south, south to north. Effectively, Netanyahu's arguing is let's pretty much go back to the pre-October 7th setup that was actually there. We always say that Gaza is an open prison. Now, finally, Yusuf, I will say the landscape in the US and the way the US has been acting, it offers Netanyahu every incentive to do what he's doing. America isn't putting any pressure on Netanyahu. It keeps supplying him with arms. So why would he change what he's doing? Why would he agree to a ceasefire when really the landscape is offering him every incentive to do this?
Why did Israel assassinate Ismail Hanaya, and how was this even possible considering he was in Tehran at the time? Can you tell us more about Iran's position on this, and why hasn't Iran responded yet?
Assassination in Israel go with hand in hand. Israel has always carried out assassination, may not necessarily call it an assassination. They usually say we carried out an operation or it's terrorism. This is a consistent Israeli policy. It's also not in Israel's interest to have peace or to compromise at the moment. As far as Israel is concerned, we are effectively expelling the people of Gaza. We are finally getting rid of them. Why would you agree to a ceasefire? You are on top in this war. You are winning. You are achieving your long-held belief, your goals. Why would you really compromise in this scenario? And the American response and the Western response, where they are supporting Israel by saying we believe in Israel's right to defend itself, why would you really agree to any compromise? So assassinations is an inherent Israeli policy. Now, the official story, Yusuf, is Ismail Hanaya. He's the head of the political wing or the public face, really, of Hamas. He's obviously doesn't live in Palestine. He's been in Syria. He's been in Qatar. He's been in Turkey quite regularly. He was actually in Iran due to the appointment of the new president. And he, as far as we know, he was actually staying at an Islamic Revolutionary Guard residential compound in the capital in Tehran. So the official story is the Israelis used a precision missile to target Hanaya. Now, this is quite interesting. And again, I would say there's a lot of information we don't really know at the moment. And in subsequent weeks, we'll probably find out. For them to have done this, they needed really, really good detailed intelligence of where he would be, where he's staying. What this shows you, if you didn't already know, is that Israel actually has a spy network in Iran. It always has. So that's why you find regularly when Iran captures Israeli spies, they disappear, they get killed. They don't make any song and dance about it, doesn't get in the media. When Israel carries out assassination, it gets media attention, but Israel denies it did it. What Israel says, we neither confirm or deny that we actually did it. So Israel needed significant intel. You needed to know movements. You needed to know he was going to be there at that time, because this strike was quite precise. This wasn't like the whole block or the whole area was blown up. So they needed intelligence for this. This obviously is a major embarrassment for Iran. This is an attack on Iran. This is an attack on Iranian territory. That's actually what's happening. And as far as we know at the moment, Yusuf, the missile was launched from outside Iran. So Iranian intelligence, missile defense didn't actually pick it up. So it's very embarrassing for them. It actually shows you that can Iran actually secure its key assets. So we know Qasem Soleimani was taken out by America a few years back. He was the head of the Revolutionary Guard. So really, at the moment, Iran is taking its time to respond. There is pressure rising from the West that Iran shouldn't respond. This is going to escalate things. So it's interesting. When Israel does something, it's not on the receiving end of criticism. When Iran needs to respond to an Israeli attack, oh, this is really, really bad. It's going to lead to regional escalation and Iran shouldn't do this. So that's really the situation we have at the moment.
Do you reckon Iran was involved in any way with the assassination?
I don't think it's the case purely because, Ismail Hanaya, Hamas in the grand scheme of things, Yusuf, for Iran, it is quite a small fish. Hezbollah is more important. Iran's assets and groups in Iraq are more important. Don't get me wrong, Hamas is an important player, but the level of support Iran gives to Hamas is quite small. In fact, Hamas gets more support from Qatar in terms of financing at the moment. Since October the 7th, Hamas obviously has been fighting in Gaza. There's been these talks going on, which Ismail Hanaya has been attending, or Hamas has been attending. So I don't see Hamas as a big problem for Iran. In fact, when Ismail Hanaya visited Tehran earlier, the Ayatollah said to Ismail Hanaya that you didn't inform us of October the 7th, so you're on your own, basically. So I don't really see there being a need for them to assassinate him. And in fact, if Iran was involved, or in this case, Iran was unable to save him, it actually makes Iran look bad. And actually, other Iranian assets must be thinking, is it really a good idea to be so close to Iran when Iran can't even defend the key assets? I think this is embarrassing for Iran, so I don't see why they'd be involved in this. And if they wanted Ismail Hanaya assassinated, there's probably a million other more easier ways to have done it without it happening in Iran itself.
Going back to the US, why has the US not put pressure on Israel? Israel's carrying out a genocide, it continues to expand the war, and in terms of global support, it's actually steadily losing that support. So why isn't the US using its leverage to actually contain Israel?
So yeah, this is probably the $1 million question actually. If me and you are both in the Israeli government, this is how things are looking, and this is how things have been looking for a while. You've made clear as Israeli officials that you want to throw the Gazans and the Palestinians into the sea. You want them to go to the desert. You want the territory of historic Palestine. You're carrying out a massacre and you're making the territory uninhabitable. The US says to me and you as Israeli officials, you have the right to defend yourselves. And actually, we will even help you defend yourself as well. So the US then supplies both of us. It supplies us long-term military equipment, makes military deals, and it's also supplying us regularly with heavy bombs. So in this scenario, there's every incentive for me to continue doing what I'm doing, but actually publicly and privately, America is continuing to help me. But the problem for America is, Yusuf, is Israel is an aircraft carrier for America in the Middle East. America has spent decades building and arming Israel to defend itself. Israel is this very small territory the size of Wales. It's surrounded by nearly 400 million Muslims. It's in a foreign territory. So America has invested significant capital, political capital, and expenditure on this. And so whilst Israel and America don't see eye to eye on everything, Israel is America's illegitimate child, so to say. Israel is taking every advantage of this, knowing the US will always be forced to defend her because she's America's spoiled child. America spent 7 decades investing in her. She ain't gonna let her evaporate over one issue. That would just be such a waste of expenditure over such a long period in time. The other thing also, Yusuf, is the Biden administration is under significant pressure from the Zionist lobby, from pro-Zionists and the defense industry to keep arming Israel and to keep supporting it. So we remember, Yusuf, Biden has historically made statements that if there wasn't Israel, he would create it. That is America showing the world, this is our spoiled child. This is our aircraft carrier. So that's why they're now having to defend it. And your spoiled child now is taking advantage of that. Your spoiled child knows no matter what we do, America might criticize us, but it will still defend us because they've been investing in us for so long. So this is all, Yusuf, all of this when you put it together, it's made it difficult for the American administration to put pressure on Israel. Publicly, America still supports Israel. It says Israel has the right to defend itself. Privately, Yusuf, the Biden administration has been trying to put a lot of pressure on the Israeli regime to wrap this up and to try and reduce the collateral damage. But remember, this is something America always does when Israel does this. America doesn't really care about the Palestinians. What America does care about is what's going on in the region and if this affects it. Now, at the moment, Yusuf, the regional rulers in the Middle East, they've done nothing for the Palestinians. Erdogan, the Jordanian leader, the Gulf leaders, they've done absolutely nothing. So if these countries were going to move, this would impact America and America will be forced to put some pressure on Israel. At the moment, that's actually not the case. And then finally, so we've got to keep in mind that the US president's hands tied this election year. You need the Zionist pro-Israeli support to win the elections. So the evangelical Christians, they are a significant support for Israel. And both the Republicans and the Democrats are fighting for their votes. And that's why, not surprising, the Democratic conferences that have happened, they've not allowed Palestinian speakers on the panel because they will start criticizing Israel and this will become a problem. So really, the challenge America's facing at the moment, Yusuf, is one of its own creation. You've got this massive investment you've made for all these decades. You built it up. You can't let it go down the drain. And what you're finding is Israel taking advantage of this. Israel knows it has a small window where it can literally get away with a genocide. And they're taking advantage of that for their own strategic objectives.
What impact will this US election that's due in November have upon the issue? And do you see both prospective candidates dealing with the issue if they become the US president?
So I remember, Yusuf, in 2015, America agreed the nuclear deal with Iran, and the US had to put immense pressure on Israel at the time, who was against it. So at that time, America put the pressure it needed to get Israel into line. They're not doing it this time round because this time round it's election year. And it's important here, why would Israel and support for Israel matter for the US election? They're two separate countries. Israel is a foreign policy issue. And we know foreign policy doesn't usually play a major role. It's more domestic issues. The reason why Israel is important is because the Zionists are a significant faction within America. And most Zionists are not even Jews, actually. The Christian evangelicals, they are a significant faction, and they have a significant base of votes, and both parties want it. And that's why the Israeli policy is very important, especially in an election year. So Donald Trump, Yusuf, he initially supported Israel's position in the war. He actually said that Israel should finish the problem. That's what he called it, the problem in the Middle East. Israel should finish it. He actually said that he would bar Gazans from entering the US, and actually he would stop all the protests that are taking place in the different universities. However, then he started criticizing Israel, saying that Israel needs to stop killing people and he needs to finish what's actually going on. We've got to keep in mind, Yusuf, Donald Trump needs Zionist support to win. He is against America playing a global role. He's against America going to lots of wars, but he needs to win the election. So really the impact this issue will have on the election, especially for Trump, is whilst Trump may be against America's role in the world, he needs Zionist support to actually win. So therefore, I think it's unlikely he's going to come out really criticizing Israel. In terms of Kamala Harris, we've got to keep in mind, Yusuf, she's never been big on foreign policy. And that's why you actually struggle to find what's her position on most global issues. Kamala Harris has actually had a disastrous term in her position as vice president. And actually, her becoming the presidential candidate has really lifted her profile. So when you actually look into her history, she's actually never said much on foreign policy. She's not really been big on foreign policy. Now, Harris has supported Israel's onslaught on Hamas. In the first few weeks when Israel was doing it, she supported it. But then she's actually criticized Israel on the humanitarian crisis that's actually taking place. She went to a campaign event when Netanyahu came to Congress and he gave a speech. However, she said in not so many words that she's not really going to depart from Joe Biden's policy. And Joe Biden's policy has been to generally criticize Israel, but then to say that you support Israel's right to defend itself. So really, I don't see much changing due to the election. I feel, looking at the position of these two candidates, whoever wins, they're really going to continue with the general policy they've already had. So whoever the new US president is, I can't see much really changing on this front.
Noah Agramani, who was held in captive in Gaza after the October 7th events, recently took to social media and contradicted the official Israeli government line that she was abused when she was in captivity. How much can we read into this, and what does this tell us about Israeli policy?
So Noah Gamani, she's this 26-year-old. She's actually half Japanese and half Israeli. She was residing in Israel. So she's this 26-year-old who was taken hostage from the infamous Supernova music festival that was going on. She became famous because she was the girl that was on the motorcycle, where apparently you had the Hamas operative and she was basically taken hostage, and she was the girl on video. So in June, she, along with 3 other hostages, they were rescued by the IDF. This is the one where the IDF freed 3 hostages, but they killed 250 civilians. So there was a big debate at 250 people killed civilians for 3 people. So since then, she became a bit of a poster child for Israel. She was actually invited and present in Congress when Netanyahu spoke there back in July. In fact, Netanyahu made it a point that I've got someone here who's been freed from the terrorists from Hamas, and that was Noah Agramani. Now, when she recently was at a G7 summit in Japan, she went back home to Japan and she attended the summit, and she was interviewed by a number of people. But these people, they made a number of statements without actually carrying out a full interview with her. They interviewed her in terms of she's here, she's come from Israel, but there was no full interview about her experience in captivity and things like that. But these outlets, they actually reported that they interviewed her and they made statements like she was held as a slave in a luxury villa, she was sexually abused, she was raped, she was beaten and sustained a number of injuries. That was what was reported in a lot of these interviews. Now, what happened, Yusuf? Well, this was the 21st of August, this G7 conference. 2 days later, she took to social media and she said that most of the remarks that had been made about her had been misquoted and taken out of context. She actually clarified that she wasn't beaten and she wasn't raped, and neither was her hair shaved by the Palestinian fighters. She actually said that she was injured because the building she was in collapsed because the Israeli Air Force carried out an attack on it. So she basically contradicted all the statements that the Israeli media and the Israelis have actually put out about her. And you've got to keep in mind here, Yusuf, that a number of claims have been made about October 7th. You know, the mass killing of babies being put into ovens, girls being, kidnapped and raped. A lot of these have actually been discredited. So really what we can take from this is just the latest issue amongst a long line that really just contradict everything Israel has been putting out there. Israel has been launched a propaganda war where it made loads of accusations, and one by one, Yusuf, all of these have been contradicted and they've actually been discredited. And unfortunately, some outlets still push these out, but all of these things have been discredited. And Noah Agramani is just the latest down a long line of people who have contradicted the official narrative. And a lot of these propaganda points, these are the justification for Israel's onslaught. It's a justification for Israel's genocide. And this is really just the latest one, which just contradicts all the propaganda that's been put out.
And final question for you, Adnan. Do you think this narrative has held up amongst the wider population across the globe, barring the political elite?
No, absolutely. In fact, there's a big divide there. You've got the small number, or the elites, who support Israel because that's their poster child, that's their aircraft carrier. You look at America, you look at Europe, the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, the anti-genocidal protests are much larger in number. The people can see now, even neutral people, Yusuf, who supported two-state solution, who supported the Israelis and Zionists who suffered the Holocaust, even they now have turned against them and they can see what's actually going on. In fact, what you have, Yusuf, you have a scenario where the masses can see a genocide is taking place, but you've got these few elites who are still trying to defend Israel, who are still trying to arm Israel. That's the situation we're in, really. And the Israeli narrative is really taken a knock. Israel's right to exist, Israel's narrative that they were victim of a genocide, and so they have the right to do whatever they want, to have their own land, to live in peace. Everyone can see through it now.
Thank you for your time today, Adnan. If you want to learn more about the issues we've raised today, please check out our website, www.thegeopolity.com, all one word. You can also learn more on many other issues by accessing our website, where you'll find comprehensive insights, analysis, articles, and deep dives. Thank you for listening.